brutal, murderous bombardment of Lebanon, killing just yesterday nearly 500 people, well in excess of 1,000 people over the last week or so. Hundreds of thousands of Lebanese people now displaced and on the move, cowering under a terrifying rain of death that is being inflicted on them by Israel. And it is absolutely clear that Israel is hell-bent on escalating into a regional conflict with very terrifying possibilities, while they continue the genocidal massacre in Gaza. And indeed, maybe even part of their calculation is to try and deflect attention away from the ongoing massacre in Gaza by trying to escalate the conflict with Lebanon, and even to try and draw into a regional conflict. So first of all, we want to highlight the fact that there's going to be protests tomorrow at the Dáil, organised by the Lebanese community here in Ireland at 5 o'clock. There's a further protest planned this Saturday at 1 o'clock at the Department of Foreign Affairs. But we also want to say that the government speaking out of both sides of their mouth on the atrocities of Israel have to be called out, because we have, as we speak, Simon Harris in the United Nations, in the United States, saying how awful the atrocities of Israel are, but refusing to call out the complicity of the United States in arming and enabling the criminal actions that Israel is committing both in Lebanon and in Gaza. It's really quite outrageous. I mean, Harris obviously knows that the public are outraged at the crimes Israel is committing in Gaza and now in Lebanon, so he mouths sympathy with Palestine but refuses to call Biden and the US administration to account for their active complicity with Israel's crimes. The simple fact is, if the United States did not continue to arm Israel and provide them with the weapons and munitions to carry out these atrocities, Israel would not be able to carry out these atrocities either in Gaza and Lebanon. And I would appeal to the media to stop letting the government have essentially carte blanche to pretend that they are critical of Israel while they continue to remain silent on the complicity of the United States government and other Western governments in arming and supporting and giving impunity to Israel. And also they're turning a blind eye to the munitions of war that have been carried through Irish airspace, possibly or even going through Shannon Airport, only because of the good investigational journalism of the Ditch have the government's statements in the summer, where they said, oh, there's absolutely no question of Israeli munitions going through Irish airspace or going through Irish airports, and now we find out via the Ditch that was absolutely untrue. Made by the Taoiseach. The government have deliberately turned a blind eye to it, and even now continue to allow the US troops through Shannon and possibly Israeli munitions and flights that are assisting Israel atrocities and crimes in Lebanon and Gaza. I also just want to say a very brief word about something else that will be raised it last week, but we really feel people should focus in on this, which is the government announced, again another misleading announcement, just before the summer recess, that they were lifting the recruitment embargo in the health service. What they didn't tell people was simultaneously they reimposed at almost exactly the same time that recruitment embargo by another name called a pay and numbers strategy. And that strategy means that staff quotas have been imposed across the HSE based on who was in post in December 2023. And what that means is thousands of posts that were not filled at that point in 2023 have been expunged. They literally have been disappeared, and the consequence of this is that hospitals our hospital workers are now in a very, very serious crisis where unsafe staffing levels are rampant across the health service. The reason I first became aware of this was because multiple workers in St Michael's Hospital in Dún Laoghaire contacted me to say there is an absolute crisis threatening the quality of services, that there's no maternity cover, there's no sick leave cover, there's no hiring of anybody, and this is a further investigation with the INMO and other hospitals. We discovered this is happening all over the health service. So there's thousands of posts which are desperately needed in the health service, have been suppressed, and we are now at a critical stage where there's unsafe staffing levels right across the health service because of an embargo that has been reimposed by the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, and that is endangering patient safety and it's endangering workers in the health service. So we will be highlighting that and demanding that embargo is lifted.
In the last couple of days, I think from Simon Harris, we have seen what is going to be the music of the general election. Fine Gael has now been in power for almost 5,000 days. They are responsible for a horrendous housing crisis, more than 14,000 people in emergency accommodation, more than 4,500 children growing up in hotels and other forms of emergency accommodation. They are responsible for that because of their policies which prioritise the profits of corporate landlords and big developers. Now, when faced with a reckoning about that, the government, and Simon Harris in particular, is determined to try to distract from their failures on the issue of housing, engaging in disgusting, lying dog whistling by instead attempting to shift blame away from those who are actually responsible, the government and the rich that they represent, and putting it onto some of the most vulnerable people in our country, the likes of families fleeing Palestine because of the genocide that Israel is inflicting upon them. I think it is incumbent on the media to call out Simon Harris's lies. We all watch when Donald Trump gets up and tells blatant lies, and we say that the media in the US, fine, should report on his comments, but then should report on the fact that what he's saying are simply not true. The same responsibility now lies with the Irish media, not to simply report Simon Harris's comments, but to report that they are factually inaccurate. Just to go through how they're factually inaccurate. So the first round of this disgusting dog whistle interview in the Sunday Times, where Simon Harris said, "People understand the fact that homeless numbers are heavily impacted by the fact we are seeing many people seek protection in our country, seek asylum in our country." That is simply not true. In other words, it is a lie. Anyone coming to Ireland seeking asylum is not included in the homeless figures. That is simply a fact. So Simon Harris was lying in that interview, and that should be pointed out. Then when he doubled down on that, he changed his story slightly, and he said the single biggest reason people gave for presenting for Dublin Homeless Services was exiting direct provision. From the latest figures that we have, which are being published from Q2, that is again simply not true. So even those exiting direct provision, by what that means, this is people who are refugees, who have had their asylum application accepted, they're now legally recognised as refugees, and they've been evicted by the government from the direct provision centres. But even then, they do not amount for the majority of increase in homelessness. The figures are very clear. The largest categories is notice of termination of tenancy in private rental sector, i.e. people being evicted, and we have a government that refuses to reintroduce an eviction ban, and relationship breakdown, family circumstance. So what we have is a lying, disgusting dog whistle by Simon Harris to try and distract from the failures of this government. I would add that it is extremely dangerous. He is playing with fire in the context of what we all saw on RTE last Thursday about what happened in Coolock and elsewhere, but also in the context whereby there is a rapidly increasing number of attacks on homeless people because they're potentially not white Irish homeless people. Simon Harris is saying these are the people who are responsible for the housing crisis. It is really absolutely disgusting. I don't think people will fall for it. I think people know the game that the government is involved in. Most people will be disgusted by it and will see the responsibility where it lies with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Finally, just on a separate issue, and to quickly raise the issue of what happened at Tola Vintage on Friday night, on Culture Night, people out enjoying themselves, trying to have a public space in our city. and being faced with horrendous Garda brutality. I don't know if people have seen the videos, but this is people out having a good time and then faced with a significant level of violence from the Garda Síochána with no seeming justification. It obviously contrasts very, very sharply, and I think for many of those people who were affected, with the scenes that they saw in Coolock, where the Gardaí turned or effectively weren't on the scene when the fires were being started and so on, or when the Garda, when the reporter was being assaulted in Newtown Mount Kennedy, Gardaí were watching it, didn't intervene at all, and yet you have a crowd of young people, including young people of colour, who were faced assault from the Garda Síochána. There needs to be an independent investigation into that.
So I'd like to make some points about Israel, and I'd like to make some points about the National Children's Hospital. So, in relation to what is happening in Gaza and what is happening in Lebanon, words are not enough from the government. We need to see action. So, first of all, on the issue of Israeli airlines that fly in Irish airspace and, in our view, carrying munitions. I believe that the government operated a policy of don't ask, don't tell. But we now know that there were at least 9 flights over Irish airspace, and there's credible evidence now, in my view, that these airlines were carrying weapons which were used in a military campaign which saw the death of many women, many children. I see that the Challenge Group, which is the airline in question, are now rerouting their planes and not flying over Irish airspace. I think that in itself is a sure indication that those are not normal flights. And I think that at a very minimum, the Challenge Group of airlines should be banned from flying over Irish airspace. And I think the same measure should be taken in relation to all Israeli airlines. I think it's been indicated that you cannot believe what is being said or not said to you, and a measure like that would be appropriate at this point. I think as well the Occupied Territories Bill, the Greens bowed the knee when the programme for government was being negotiated, but look at what is happening on the ground now. Look at the slaughter that is taking place. Are the Green Party going to stay in government, sitting in their ministerial positions, while what is happening and the government refuse to pass the Occupied Territories Bill? The Occupied Territories Bill should be passed, and I want to use my time at the platform today to put it up to the Green Party and say, what are you going to do about this? On the issue of BAM are denying the charge that they are, quote, holding the state to ransom, unquote. We believe that BAM are indeed holding the state to ransom. The National Paediatric Hospital Development Board said that BAM are attempting to use every opportunity to get every last euro from the state. Might not be the exact word for word quotation, but that was the gist of it. I think that is very true. BAM are also involved in the situation at the Cork Event Centre, where it's quite possible the state are going to be asked to put €100 million on the table, when the original figure was €20 million, and there's serious questions need to be asked about that as well. But it's not just about BAM. It's about the politicians, the parties and the governments that put BAM in the position where they were able to do this. Who signed the contracts? Who pushed the contracts through? Simon Harris. Leo Varadkar's fingerprints are on that. Stephen Donnelly, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. And this whole episode underlines the clear need for the establishment of a state construction company. Right? Why would BAM not try and extract every euro from the taxpayer? That's what they do. That's what for-profit construction companies do. And Simon Harris, Leo Varadkar, Stephen Donnelly, they know that. The only way that you avoid this type of a scenario is that you take the maximisation of profit out of the building out process, and the way to do that is the establishment of a state construction company, which we also need for social and affordable housing, and should be funded from some of the Apple billions. So I'll leave it at that.
Is that okay?
Yeah.